Big Bottom. And it used to hold one of the greatest stands of forest of any kind anywhere in the world. Now you have to walk about a half mile in the town of Guerneville, which is right on the Russian River, right there, to see any redwoods at all. So one of the more fascinating things is that Raymond Clark, who was born in 1903 and became a state forester, he said that on the Guerneville Big Bottom there once grew the most voluminous and tallest body of living vegetable matter ever to have grown upon this earth at any place and at any time. And 1 acre of this forest yielded 1.5 million board feet. And that was at a time when they didn't measure what shattered, and a lot shattered. And there was one redwood that was approximately 380 feet tall. We're now ascertaining, I've been talking with some scientists here at Humboldt State and elsewhere, that the tallest redwoods were well over 400 feet. The tallest tree officially measured was a 415-foot fir in British Columbia. And you know, I won't say the name who I'm talking to because the scientists, they don't like to say anything they can't prove. But one scientist in particular told me there were definitely redwoods well over 400 feet tall. And probably Guerneville had them, a very protected valley. So this is where I grew up. I grew up hearing the lore of this place. And I think it became infused in my spirit and my soul. And that's one of the biggest parts of the title, The Ghost Forest. I grew up knowing and hearing about this place and going out to Armstrong Woods, 3 miles up the road where it wasn't nearly as spectacular, but beautiful old road. And having that as part of myself, the lore of this ghost forest. So the book is also, of course, going to talk about Pacific Lumber's lands and the grandeur and what we found there when the takeover occurred in 1985 and into 86 when we first started going out there. And I guess I'm a little redundant here, but here's the title of the book, In Progress, which, you know, if I'm lucky, you'll see it in 2 years. And the book itself will start, and it's a little jarring here, but we're going to start right here with a bombing of Judy Berry and Daryl Cherney in 1990, May 24th of 1990. It was a horrid event, highly significant in all of the history of the United States, the world, in terms of environmental activism. And Judy, in particular, was a target. Literally, this came in the early 90s. She got this in the mail. That's the infamous Minuteman symbol used during the 1960s by radical right-wing anti-communist group to scare, and they didn't just scare people, they killed them as well. She received just about a month before the bombing, this death threat. Go back to where you came from. They're pretty sure they know who Daryl knows who did this. And there's a lot. This is a huge story, and I encourage you to see Daryl Cherney's movie, Who Bombed Judy Berry. It's a great documentary about this. We all got this one. Really lots of death threats on the phone and in the mail. The Stompers, you know, we know who did this. You know, pick this out, and you know, our justice will be swift, etc. And so Daryl and I co-founded Humboldt County Earth First in mid-1996. We met during the spring equinox that year. I've been looking into Pacific Lumber's land since the Maximum Takeover in late '85, but I was working as a journalist, as Ken pointed out, and I kind of eased my way into accidentally into activism. So why all the violence, threats of violence, and actual violence? I was assaulted a couple of times in 1989 and 1990. Daryl and Judy were ran by a log truck that they blockaded the day before. There was never any prosecution or arrest of anybody who did these things, and there's an official veil of violence in the area in the late 80s and into 1990. Well, Judy in particular was opposing Louisiana Pacific, whose executives, especially one in particular, were pernicious individuals. And she was not only looking into their logging, trying to stop liquidation logging of their 300,000 acres in Humboldt and Mendocino counties, particularly Mendocino, but she was also organizing labor. We know how dangerous that is. Daryl and I were mostly concerned with Pacific Lumber lands. Myself in particular, I did some work in Mendocino County, not very much. And we found out a lot, and we're going to see what that is now. In late 1985, as Ken mentioned, Charles Hurwitz, who you've all heard of, took over the Pacific Lumber Company. junk bond leverage buyout. And he had some help from Michael Milken, Ivan Boesky, and I could not find a good picture of Boyd Jeffries, all convicted of felonies later and indicted, and part of the indictments having to do with the Pacific Lumber takeover. Except for Hurwitz.
Yeah.
That's right. Thank you. I actually ripped this off from the Humboldt Watershed Council PowerPoint that I found recently. That was sent to me. It was really great, so I have a few of their slides in here. The first opposition to the Pacific Lumber takeover came from the workers, and people forget this. You know, oh, the workers just bent over for them. Well, that's not true. This is an incredible ad that was placed in the Sunday Eureka Times Standard full page, in which they say, we do not feel that this impending takeover will be in the best interest of ourselves, the shareholders, and the communities in which our company serves. And it was signed by about 460 PL employees, more than half of the workforce. It's highly significant because you just didn't speak out against the boss. So that was a big deal. And they were right, because shortly thereafter, Maxam released a prospectus where they were floating even more debt, and they said, if you expect to double the timber harvest to a level, or to increase it to a level which would be double the 1985 harvest. And they did that, but they also changed from selective logging to clear cutting, and the board foot volume went more than double. So they were definitely liquidating. So what did Pacific Lumber get for their $900 million? Well, they got the company-owned town of Scotia, which we're all familiar with, I'm sure. And they also got a $360 million welding operation, and we know that's what it was worth because they sold it immediately. San Francisco Sales Building, $30 million, they sold that. The pension fund, they ripped off for $60 million. And there's some San Mateo County forest land, 4,000 acres, and I don't remember how much they got for that. But in the first year, not including timber sales, lumber sales, Maxam liquidated more than half of what they paid for Pacific Lumber. We, of course, were interested in the old growth. At the time of the takeover, there were 8,000 acres of what we call virgin, unentered, ancient redwood. Very importantly, there were 56,000 acres of residual ancient redwood, and these were forests in which the old Pacific Lumber had selectively logged, still really destroying a lot of the old growth habitat, but also retaining very important forest values, perhaps in particular the soils. And we didn't see the crashing of the fisheries, diminishment, but not the crashing that we saw after Maxam came in. Also, 89,000 acres at the time of second growth, mature second growth redwood, and another 8,000 acres of virgin Douglas fir, which was even more rare than untouched redwood in California. At the time, the California Department of Forestry, and we're going to definitely get into them pretty soon, said that the trees on Pacific Lumber lands were generally small, usually not more than 200 to 400 years old. All the best redwood lands are protected in parks. That's a direct quote. And we found that that was true throughout Pacific Lumber land. Everywhere we went, we found huge trees. This is the biggest tree we ever found, 20 feet in diameter. That guy there is 6'2", Larry Evans, one of the heroes of the story. And that we found that tree once. It's like a ghost tree. We found it once in Headwaters Grove. It still stands. Nobody's seen it since, as far as I know. It's in a remote area on a ridge between Salmon Creek and Little South Fork River, just down below the river. So in the mid-'80s, into the later '80s, I was still working as a journalist, still trying to kind of keep a cover in that way, but it was eroding quickly. However, my path to being an activist was almost disrupted in October of '86 when the publishers of the North Coast News offered me the editor's position at their newspaper. That was a big deal for me. That was my career goal. I was 25 years old, and I accepted. The next day, we had a planned hike out for the first time to Pacific Lumber land. And this is really, can tell you the importance of seeing something for yourself. We went out and we found a residual old growth logging operation. You can see there's the loggers. Those are big trees. Those are the trees that were left by the old PL when they selectively logged. We walked through that, took some pictures, walked to a landing. This is one of those landings greater than a half acre in size, poised on a steep slope overlooking southward Yager Creek, where Yager drops 2,000 feet in 1.5 horizontal miles, which is really a huge spectacular. And we got to the edge of the landing, and this is what we saw. And this is what we call Owl Creek Road. We'll talk about this later. In the foreground is the unentered virgin redwood, about 1,000 acres at the time. And in the background, where all that fog is, that's the residual forest. That was about a 30,000 acre old growth redwood forest. Again, had been selectively logged, but look at it.